I'm John Dubia, retired soldier, part of the AFCEA team, in conjunction with the Naval Institute, putting on Joint Warfighting Conference 2011. What a great day one we had yesterday, and I will tell you, with the action-packed program we have today, it certainly stands to be another action-packed and great day. I want to extend a special welcome this morning to the Air Combat Command A6 Commanders Conference under the leadership of Brigadier General Steve Spano, great friend, great Air Force officer, and I appreciate General Fraser working it to where this conference that is taking place for the classified sessions on Langley was able to make today the day here at Joint Warfighter. So for members of industry, you're going to have a great opportunity to hear from these A6 commanders literally from around the world, talking to one of them in from Bahrain and again worldwide. Our opening speaker this morning, distinguished fellow, he goes back a long ways with John Dubia, and I'm sure he's going to tell a story or so. I'm not sure how true they are, but that's okay. But the 21st Secretary of the Air Force, Mike Wynne, distinguished career in uniform and out of uniform as a senior civilian Secretary of the Air Force for 7 years. He was the Undersecretary and Deputy Under for the Acquisition Technology and Logistics. He understands industry's business. He also had 26 years in the aerospace industry. He was a member of industry. He brings a package that is a tight package: industry, government, and selfless service. He placed cyberspace in the mission statement of the United States Air Force. He's a great believer in the non-commissioned officer corps, and I'm sure he's going to recognize his command chief, Master Sergeant, who was with him during his service. When you take a look at it, Secretary Wynne was and is and will be a futurist. He understands it, he gets it, he understands U.S., he understands coalition, he understands warfare. He brings a very, very good perspective globally, and that, I think, is what you want to take a look at as we take a look at this conference, the theme of the conference, and the piece parts that everybody is participating in. So without further ado, please help me recognize and bring to the podium the 21st Secretary of the Air Force, the Honorable Mike Wynne.
Thank you very much, John. As John indicated, we do go back a few years. In fact, we're stopping the count. As of a couple years ago, I think we stopped counting how many years we go back, because I frankly got tired of calling him sir. I think he's outranked me for every year we were either as cadets or in the service until such time as I was appointed as Secretary of the Air Force, and I finally called him up and had to demand that he reverse that for once in his life. And so he's been very kind ever since. I will also say that there's something about being a classmate that deserves mention, and that is that we do stick by each other. And we have one right now that is up at Walter Reed. We hope he gets released today. He was supposed to be here as a panel member as General Bobby Scales, and we're all going to miss him today. I was actually, I had harbored some hard rolls and eggs to throw at him as his panel moderator, but won't be able to do that. But we do wish him well and hope he comes back and recovers in a strong way. I talked to him yesterday, and he was in praise of military medicine, and I said, Bob, you should be in praise of medicine, period. I said, you know, because be it medical or civilian, if they make you well, they're really terrific. And if not, well, you don't get to ask again anyway. So, but thank you. I really acknowledge all of the general and flag officers that with whom it was my pleasure to serve, and do acknowledge Rod, who is our chief of the enlisted corps for the United States Air Force for the years I was there. And what isn't well known is that Rod helped me edit. I did every month a letter to the airmen, and Rod helped me edit that letter on many occasions to make sure that we were speaking with the right tone and the right voice to airmen all over. And each month I tried to emphasize a thematic to make sure that they understood that we were all in the fight together from top to bottom, and that we knew sort of who the good guys were and what we were trying to accomplish in our Air Force. You know, I'm pretty sure that all of my fellow officers and enlisted that served just loved some of my articles that I wrote and I've been writing about system effectiveness, some prospects for the future. You're going to find in the back a couple of books on three-dimensional warrior and on asymmetric warfare. They're free. If you get a chance, grab one or both. But it's really not anymore about electronics capability, but it's about the total system's effectiveness that I worry about. I think we have been lulled into a sort of lethargy by doing exactly what we should be doing, and that is exploiting the concept of total air dominance that we've enjoyed since post-Vietnam. I think we now have to get to work to make sure that we continue to enjoy that aspect of and that concept of operations. It is said that when you leave the Pentagon, in the bushes right as you exit from the river entrance, there comes from the bushes something, someone, and they immediately give you a dose of knowledge. And in that dose of knowledge, it contains all those actions, theories, and frankly, solution sets that you were blinded to or frankly simply ignored, but now became very pressing to your successor. And zap, into your brain it goes. This allows for future articulate consulting. It allows for articles that demand publication. And sometimes it allows for great speeches, because all of a sudden you now know, hook, line, and sinker, exactly what your successor should do. First, I'd like to salute your efforts throughout this assembly to protect America, to enhance our capabilities, and frankly, stand in awe of the shock effect of the Special Forces team in taking down a compound earlier this month. At the same time, we should honor all the men and women who have given of themselves in the pursuit of justice, many of whom has made the ultimate sacrifice. But frankly, this assembly deserves the taking of a small moment to revel in this success, because it was very much driven by the technology push and the communications capabilities and the electronic installs that you all had a hand in conceiving, designing, developing, and training all these magnificent warfighters to make this happen. For the capability to keep the Situation Room very well informed at internet speeds, and for the operational security that made the success so real. What you will hear today now is my worry and concern that as a nation, we are turning away from consolidating our gains and pushing new investment to maintain what I see as our asymmetric advantage. We've achieved much by effectively owning the third dimension. Once you own this advantage, gained through dominating the air and space, exploiting it means getting your cameras and telemetry gear ever closer to the ground. It means intimidating your enemy with flybys, venting sound and fury. It has meant filling the sky with watching and listening devices. It allowed me to foster a concept called spherical situation awareness and speak to West Point cadets about how to be a three-dimensional warrior. We develop films about how we fight to press the issues about don't engage without connected indirect shooters, either from aircraft, from Navy ships, or from howitzers, as well as providing the force commander with a God's eye view. We passed out rovers wherever we could, domestically and internationally, and connected them to over 80 air platforms. The connectivity thus offered protection for any mission, anywhere in the theater. We called for a joint operations order to combine all the force elements around the geospatial coordinates. But I will tell you, even for fast-moving and agile warfighters, this was really a bridge too far, and that technology was moving too fast for the culture. Now, first responders in state and local agencies have this capability. I recently saw that the Civil Air Patrol aircraft can now be fitted with a portable Predator trackball and transmission system to provide them connectivity and spherical situation awareness, whether in flood or fire. And so I really salute also this fusion of military and civilian needs and hope that we can grow this to assist others in their first responder duties. But again, it didn't come without standards for eagle vision and gateways for transmission devices. A second piece of this puzzle, during Vietnam, I never got to theater. I did, however, have the privilege of receiving what I refer to as the Black Medal. The Black Medal was the first creation of the Unit Recognition Medal and was awarded to the developers of the AC-130 gunship and the whole Spooky series. I was fortunate to join an extraordinary team that installed the 105 millimeter gun on the AC-130 and was an analyst on the team to create the various autopilots to make sure that the accuracy of the system was unparalleled. The Black Medal, we all thought, was to allow others in our Air Force to recognize the team that put a big ugly paddle outside the side of a sleek transport airplane. But it did change the culture of the Air Force. This pushed us far closer to the Marine aviation as a close fire support element. And many is the time that the closed loop and closed form targeting system took data from a force commander and stopped an attack either with a stream of tracers, licking the earth at night, or a high-powered round into the head of a convoy. The real breakthrough, besides essentially bringing a tall hill to any battle zone, was in the OODA loop. The closed-form kill system allowed transition from observe to action to be very, very fast. Fast forward now to the Air Force development of Predator. Now that GPS allowed one to know where the remotely piloted aircraft was, and suddenly we could replicate the kill loop by allowing the remotely piloted aircraft to be armed. As well, from the earliest days, we worked the gunship to be connected as well to the fire teams to bring support fires to within 50 meters of friendly positions. Now, with GPS offsites coupled with the John Madden screen to draw on the common screen, provides such great accuracy that every mistake that we make appears to be deliberate. Secretary Rumsfeld stated famously that you go to war with the army you have, not the army you want. he really meant the armed forces. But at the time, the query was about the protective capability of the military vehicles, especially the Humvee. Though he was excoriated at the time, he also told his staff privately that we should thank his predecessors for their continued investment in an uncertain future and their stalwart belief in the Reagan theory that no one ever got into a war because they were too strong. It was pointed out to him that we needed to increase the leverage amongst all of our systems. So he gave me the task of fostering interoperability. There are times when those kinds of missions would be extraordinarily intimidating and cause one to pause. But in this case, it was actually a thematic in each of the services. But the issue was cross-service, which remains at the seam of unfunded requirements. As many of you had experienced as we develop platforms, the expectation always is that all of the information and all of the intelligence requirements to maximize the capability of the system is simply expected to arrive in an orderly fashion and be made instantaneously available to the fire control director to make the system maximally effective. I call those the lightning bolt charts because they all had jig-jag lines from one system to another system. But during development, there was absolutely no assurance that any such thing would actually work this way. But they form the core of interoperability, gaining information for the senior leaders and maximizing the effectiveness of the entire force, both domestic and coalition. I can remember a second particularly interesting meeting when I was told that we should not worry about the future because we would never be fighting peers. I responded that I lost my brother in Vietnam, flying an F-4 in the north. At the time, no one in America would have given him peer status. But they were clearly using peer equipment. The meeting became quite chilly as this dose of reality was very unwelcome. But it was my reality. My push to maintain the technology lead in the asymmetric advantages that we enjoyed was not exactly appreciated across the board. But my reality colored my desire to push a program called the Joint Unmanned Combat Air System, JUCAS, which I guess now would be called JRPA for Joint Remotely Piloted Aircraft. This introduced the stealth platform to remotely piloted aircraft at a decent size construct, and at some point target replacing the scale of the B-2. The Navy is now the remaining player in this program. I feel the Navy has been seeking a stealthy platform ever since the A-12 cancellation killed their advanced future. Yes, those of us who remember will acknowledge the Navy actually went first in the world of stealth, then the F-22, and the Navy will, I am absolutely convinced, learn what missions are the right ones for this capable system, while I hope their stealthily manned quest will be filled by the F-35C. Yes, I believe that we need more fifth-generation aircraft, lest we find ourselves unable to uphold General Kurt LeMay's mission to hold hostage any target in the world. Isn't this what we also saw in the terrific takedown right out of Tom Clancy novel that sent a chilling message to all those that make our list, in the words of that country song? In the meantime, we see glimpses of the future through the integrated air defense systems and the well-designed competitor aircraft that are being offered on the market and on the world stage. We see the emergence of national strategic naval assets that may begin to encroach upon our mission space. We see the continued development of missiles that are designed to reach out and touch not only our bases, but sometimes our shores, as well as the boundaries of our allies. I can also remember well in the Pentagon they have what they call a radio rodeo, not with horses, but with talk show hosts. And we were in line rotating through the various station hosts, some of whom were live and some of whom were taped. But many were in effect taping for some time later. In front of me, about 2 interviews, sat Secretary Rumsfeld. And I overheard and so more dimly recall one of his exchanges, but I remember the essence. He was asked why we needed a defense equipment so powerful when the likelihood of an invasion was so unlikely. His response designed my mission statement when I was confirmed as Secretary of the Air Force. He said, "Our freedoms have great reach, but once the President cannot exercise a sovereign option because he could be dissuaded or deterred, all of us will lose a little of our freedom as American citizens." This translates into the following. The defense our country desired was not just to defend our shores, but to be strong enough to allow our President to exercise restraint if it was his choice. This was a profound moment for me, as I knew it because I carry the arrogance of freedom no matter where I go. I had lived it, but I didn't know it because it was inherent. But I certainly had lived it during my international travels, both in uniform and out. My mission statement became that the mission of the United States Air Force was to deliver sovereign options for the defense of America and its global interest, to fly and fight in air, space, and cyberspace. Further, this led to the argument to continue the investment in exploiting the asymmetric advantages that we had in air dominance, when I expressed it a little bit doctrinally, that if you ever find yourself in a fair fight, it is because of bad planning. And planning is not just tactical, but might also be strategic and might also involve the quadrennial defense review. Now that I've laid the groundwork for you all, let me relate these experiences to the challenges that I see for AFCEA members, both currently serving and adopting the material solutions or designing TTPs around the kit that you have, and those that are trying to discern the needs, requirements, and desire, read funding, to move to a different future than the linear one that is always forecast. Recall that when Hitler turned the world upside down, his forces were awesome, and the word blitzkrieg became the word of the day. But little known was the reality that only about 15%, if that, of his forces were actually modernized. Germany had its share of horse-drawn artillery and horse-drawn logistics trains. They went to great lengths to avoid taking bridges out, as did we later, by the way. The real change was in the synchronization of the battle, the improvement of command and control, and the ability to coordinate the action truly underscored the impact on morale and the destruction of the armies arrayed against this force. The crudeness of the coordination would currently be ridiculed, but it is all part of warfare, and you either have it or you don't. We here and now should take note of the 15% part, as this very well might be what we are afforded when we next are pushed into a war not of our choosing. The lack of projected air power caught many unawares during World War II, and so Dunkirk happened. And the reach of the citizenry to save their army in any way they could, but principally by returning them to the friendly shores of England. That said, Germany actually lost that war in 1936, about the same time that Britain won it. This startling element contains the seeds of the challenges for all of you, as found in the wiki. The German Dornier Do-19 was a 4-engine heavy bomber that was awarded in 1934 and first flew on October 28, 1936. But only one prototype flew, and it was converted to a transport in 1938. The other 2 were scrapped. The Luftwaffe had a shortcoming in the lack of efficient heavy bomber fleet ever since. General Lieutenant Walter Reber, the Luftwaffe's first Chief of Staff, was the most persistent advocate of the German long-range bomber fleet. The technical division issued a specification for a 4-engine heavy bomber, but after Weaver's death in an airplane crash, his successor, Albert Kesselring, canceled Germany's long-range bomber project to concentrate on short-range close air support bombers. This cancellation allowed the British Air Force to move their bases to the north in Scotland, and the range, configuration, and payload basically made the 2-engine bomber subject to harassment and allowed the British to fully recover until the American 8th Air Force showed up with heavy bombers and took the fight right into the German heartland. On the British side, they were the first to exploit radar as a defense against attack aircraft, spurred on by fears that the Germans were developing death rays. The Air Ministry asked British scientists in 1934 to investigate the possibility of propagating electromagnetic energy and the likely effect. Following a study, they concluded that a death ray was totally impractical, but the detection of aircraft appeared very feasible. Robert Watson Watt's team demonstrated to his superiors in 1936 the capabilities of a working prototype and then patented the device. The British could detect German air approach and thus direct the attacking British fighters in raids, and the raids over Britain proved so costly that the German Air Force that they invested in missile bombardment instead. Lest I digress to next waritis, let's get to the challenges. First, let's talk cyber. Cyber is about spectrum, and thus falls directly into your domain. There's an argument as well that the information transmission from communication and electronics is actually a subset of cyber, and the light spectrum was untapped. There's also an argument that says that cyber is a subset of communication and electronics for the same reason. For now, let's not concern ourselves with Spectrum Pac-Man, but worry about its finiteness. The fact that some in government actually see spectrum sales as a profit center. As you might be aware, our ships approach the coast of Japan. Many of the emitters must be turned off. This can be dangerous for some ships, with the crews all trained to operate in automatic. This is the same issue for aircraft. Spectral control and jamming by cohabitating EMF thus is a major challenge as we take our architecture and move forward. We lost because we were not articulate in the technology discussions, the laser satellite system TSAT, which would have increased transmission speed and spread of spectrum, because some in Congress and in the DoD thought it was okay to live with AEHF. We need to have a coherent discussion about what means Wi-Fi in our future. The next war could be first to fiber, as the ability to transmit might be corrupted and jammed, and so resilient architectures to fight through even something as dramatic as an EMP detonation or as open as the old loud jammers, where we need concentrated, low probability of intercept transmission. This leads me to the second part of cyber, which is compressed data algorithms. This branch of encrypted mathematics was abandoned with the ability to pump terabytes of data. But is that a resilient approach? We will be back to dormant Sioux dialects and little of them. We need to compress video streams into relevant data and then repixelate them for viewing. We are burying our transmission systems in non-relevant imagery. Third in cyber is trusted information. I am tired of hearing that we can't fix the problem. The Band-Aids piling up on data overlays are a very bad answer, and sometimes introduce malware with the fixes, kind of like going to the hospital only to be infected by something they were harboring. We need to get to the heart of the matter. We think computational mathematics and the baseline of computational systems and restore order in this domain. We invented it, but we've only pushed it for productivity. In our zeal for productivity, we do not hire police and firemen. I don't think we can wait for data Armageddon. A second major challenge, Antennas. The Army has become very frustrated with the myriad antennas that have been foisted off with each system. As a result, command vehicles veritably bristle with forms and shapes that frankly offer terrific targeting opportunities for the enemy. As a result, they're now contemplating victory architecture, which I don't have any insight to the base mathematics, but I can advise you the specification for the victory architecture is contained in a 2+ inch thick book, and so is not constrain the developer world, but will give transmission world some design constraints reminiscent of what's going on in jitters, where the developers refused to be constrained in spectrum, and the program just grew and grew. I also know the last time the government invented an architecture, it was Ada. Cost many billions and continues to plague the F-22, the space-based infrared satellite system, and 2 other victims were the Crusader and the Comanche, the Army light helicopter. I do know that the industry needs to get in the game and not simply as a contractor. We need a morphing antenna and one that is far more easily attuned to high-speed data transmission than what we have now. But I offer that at some point there will be no more tolerance for different transmission methodologies requiring different antennas. If you go to the American public, they're confused about why we have problems with antennas. They don't see antennas anymore. They have a BlackBerry, they have cell towers, they don't get the reason that we have transmission problems. And I think it adds a little bit because those are the folks that grow into congressmen, that grow into regulators, that go to the spectrum conferences and see spectrum as a very profitable commodity. Here we need to better understand time division multiply, TDMA, as well as the modulated division architecture, CDMA. The constraint is international as well, but I think the root is in design, and the root may also be an operator discipline. The third challenge, AESA radars. We are in kindergarten as to the utility of the breakthrough in actively electronically scanned arrays. AESA radars have the potential to be way more than just radars. Today, the wide bandwidths and advanced waveforms we are achieving with AESA radars is opening up the possibility of whole new functions. Why not use them for precision electronic and computer network attack? At the same time, we watch the Air Force give up on MADL for the F-22 because it's too hard, which means that all the potential for a node on the net must be truncated due to a lack of inventiveness. I refer you back up to antennas to accomplish the high-speed transmissions that communicate the situation awareness, so we essentially are wasting what I would tell you is the best situation awareness sensor we have on the modern battlefield. We've already proven that they can handle CDL-like waveforms, so why not use AESA for laser-like LPI communications? The Navy, with larger versions of AESA on board their ships, should drive experimentation, just as they found function with tactical lasers and have previously with defensive systems like Metal Storm, which leads me to the fourth challenge. Do we abandon the connectivity argument or await the reemergence of total air dominance as we currently enjoy in Iraq and Afghanistan? We spent enormous resources combining with our coalition partners in Libya to take down a crude air defense system. This because we were daunted by our ignorance of the capability of our system and, of course, adverse to casualties. How close to other Mideast or Far East competitors will we risk our air platforms? In another forum on a different media, I have argued we should stand down all the large ISR fleet because they cannot penetrate defended airspace, and we are targets in all of our war games. So we must concentrate on fulfilling the promise of making the F-35 and the F-22 fifth-generation platforms a true air battle manager, required to stay aloft and direct the battle. Denying the vulnerability of large ISR platforms will lead to expectations that they will live and provide a contribution to the campaign. In another paper that is coming, I asked why we were putting any money into upgrading fourth-generation fighters. as they simply cannot participate in the first 48 hours of war with an adversary with a modern air defense system. For that matter, a smart adversary will not expose all of his integrated air defense system at the beginning of the war. The notion of being able to kick down the door is from the last century and will not be applicable in the future. And they should be slave to the fifth-generation target system, much as the F-16 can be slave to the F-15 target system, and dispense their weapons at designated targets out of sight. This also allows a true role for remotely piloted aircraft when we lack total air dominance, that is, as mules for the F-35 and the F-22. In a truly hostile environment, the fifth-generation fighter must be the last one to shoot, and should do so only after all the other available missiles are gone. Again, this presumes we get the breakthrough for converting them to air battle managers from current air warriors. Fifth is leverage and closed-form solutions. Communication and electronics is all about leveraging our smaller forces against any combination of enemies. This means shared situation awareness and putting the right gun on the right target. Some of you may have just read that they feel like the Israelis are on the wrong side of the cost curve because they're shooting a $500,000 missile at a $5,000 to $50,000 missile coming in. That does not mean that you shouldn't protect your population at any expense, but it does give one pause about how we are responding, and we can't seem to get the right gun on the right target. With the decommissioning of the Joint Forces Command, where does leverage go as a mission? Who takes it on? Does it get absorbed in OSD? I mean, where does it lie? And I know that networks and integration, of course, tries to foster the standards and patents, but frankly, where does that mission lie? What happens to the Allied Command transformation, which was all about, by the way, almost giving specified roles to specified allies, such as the Czechs being the biodefense people, and bringing together a totally integrated force based on leveraging communications and electronics. Such target matching can be done, but it will take a fast and adaptive operations center. I've long advocated for a truly joint operations order, combining all affected service players and including cyber around a geospatial line of attack. To truly limit friendly fire, blue force tracking might not be enough. Active limits and time-based constraints will be the limiting factor. The gun, I mean, by the way, this is old stuff. This is moving the artillery right as the infantry advances. This is making sure that we don't have a bomb attack coming right on top of our forces, but give them a chance to move. The gunship control system taught me that as well, being trained on the range as having the target presented to the shooter is the key to the kill. It is the same with any indirect fire support system. There is no reason that naval gunfire cannot be aimed and controlled by a joint force commander so long as that commander can effectively share the target with the shooter. So, ladies and gentlemen, we need breakthroughs. We can't expect that future competitors will make an error in strategy, as did the Germans. I worry that in our outlook and in our allies' outlook for us, we are, by investment decision and by inherent aging of all of our fleets, diminishing our strategic margin and unwittingly inviting competition. Should some competitor surface, it will come at the time of maximum vulnerability for us, and so we must be electronically agile. In any time where platforms are not drawing investment, we will find that investment going into communications and electronics sector to leverage what we have in the best way possible. We can expect that this assembly would be capable to drive innovation and provide that margin of excellence to sustain us through the fight. While we seek resilience in our technology, frankly, through all the flooding, through all of the tornadic activity, we've already determined that we do have resilience in our population. Can we extend that to our armed forces? I took a lot of assignments in my tenure, but the one that proved the most difficult was interoperability. And I fear that as we move into a fifth-generation environment, all of those capabilities we've enjoyed will be left behind. Stealth is a wonderful thing, but when it leads to stovepipe developments, one must be concerned. The regression to elements we've seen before, such as replacing the F-117 Nighthawk and then replacing the B-2, does not consolidate what we have accomplished in the joint exploitation of the vertical dimension, which should push all of us to be three-dimensional warriors. It is when we can truly leverage the best of each service that we become truly joint. And that coordination, that shared situation awareness, that improved OODA loop will respond to that constitutional charge to provide for the common defense. You'll find 2 booklets on the table in the rear. Feel free to take 1 or more of them. They are free. And again, my congratulations to the Special Forces team, the brave helo pilots, but don't forget all that communication electronics that underpinned their success. I salute all of you and thank you for making America as strong as we can afford. God bless America.
Secretary Wynne, Lynn Welsman to you. In developing the fifth-generation platforms into the battle management systems you talk about, what kind of data links are needed and what kind of development of those data links need to be pursued? You mentioned data compression, you mentioned new antennas, but is any of that actually in the pipeline, in the program now?
Yes, I will tell you that sadly, each service is developing its own operations center. I say that because this is an area where jointness could prevail. And yet I have been witness to individual expenses, and maybe it's about learning. But in some cases, and though I will tell you that the theater commander should have his situation awareness and should be able to direct operations in the theater, the tactical commander needs more, and each of those systems is under development. And frankly, one of the things I really like to see was the imposition of standards so that we could have almost like IPv6, so that we could have a transmission system and a receiving system that was available throughout all. What I did see, though, was some corruption of those standards, so that as I approached the tactical situation, we would give up the funding to connecting these battlefields. I'll give you an example. When we were doing GPS-3, which is to make sure we have the military spectrum covered for GPS signals, what I found was that no platform program manager had actually gotten the order to put the M code into that system. So I started asking, are we going to issue semaphore flags so that the newer vehicles and newer airplanes that would have M code as a built-in can raise the semaphore flag so that everybody would know that they actually knew where they were. So it's that recognition that not everyone is following through, number one, and number two, the legacy, the 85% that we are faced with, that essentially never get upgraded and cut into the battlefield management systems and the joint operating systems that we talk about, is really a concern of mine. And I think It's going to be in the training, it's going to be in the tactics, techniques, and procedures, and it's really going to be in the command resilience that this is going to come out. Does that get to your question? Yes. Yes. Yep. Yes. That was the intent of getting the MADL system up. It turns out on the F-22, you can communicate inter-flight, and you can actually share weapons, and you can share targets inter-flight. And my question was always, if I can fly those airplanes 4 kilometers, 20 kilometers apart and still communicate, then why can't I have a transponder airplane, a node, that receives that same information and connects it to a satellite? And I frankly never got a satisfactory answer. The latest I've heard now is that ACC has essentially run out of money and has canceled that. So now there is either another one that they won't talk about, or the capability that we really envision to have this thing go out. And what I wanted it to be was a scout. I mean, in the old world, I want it to be a scout where it goes out and actually does not shoot its missiles, but actually tracks and finds any integrated air defense system that it can, which then gets shot from behind the forward edge of the battle area. So, I mean, I just think we need to find a way. And in the same way, the AESA that are on Navy ships, the Navy is stuck with what I would call a low transmission system. They are almost at this day and age a disadvantaged user. Not all their ships, but most of their ships. They need to figure out how to get to be an advantage user by taking what they can get out of the AESA and getting it up to a satellite and become a high-speed transmitter rather than a low-speed transmitter. That's the point.
More questions, Secretary? Great documents, all international folks, ACC, commander, man on your great folks up in what
Sir, Bob Knuth with Bridgeborne. So much the focus is on the technology aspect. Today we do have the capability of connecting to legacy systems, whether proprietary or unproprietary, and pulling that data together to produce pictures. Often, whether those systems, I'll pick on unclassified systems. Sometimes when we pull those unclassified systems together, produces a classified picture, which takes us into the realm of policy and restrictions based upon who that information can be shared with, how it can be shared, et cetera. I was wondering if you'd go into that path a little bit, because often it's not the technical aspects, but it gets into Washington and politics.
Well, let me start by saying we're probably not going to resolve the international traffic in arms regulations right here. But I will say that, as they say, nobody's an atheist in a foxhole, and nobody much cares about the ITAR regulations when the bad guys are coming over the hill. So it's one of those situations that I would say we have to develop the capabilities to really overlay and I think create that information mosaic that populates to the lowest level of command, right down to the maintenance yard on an airplane to make sure that they understand what's coming in requiring damage, a shipyard, the same thing, to the tactical officers trying to take a hill. All of this needs to be on an information mosaic that they can access on their own with their capability, with their clearances that they secure. I would also tell you that I think in a In peacetime, we put a lot of constraints on how we fight. In wartime, especially on a tactical battlefield where we are enjoying the capabilities of all of our coalition forces, many of those constraints disappear. We don't expect people to be in there taking notes or taking away hard drives, but at the same time, getting a visual check on where the force structures are. In fact, one of my driving forces in making sure that Rover became available to our coalition partners was that very unfortunate incident where we killed some Canadian soldiers. And we just can't have that friendly fire, that kind of friendly fire. I mean, friendly fire cost me some classmates in Vietnam. You can't have that friendly fire anymore. We have to get rid of it. I mean, we are terribly, but we are deadly accurate. And when we say that, if you give me the wrong coordinates, I am deadly accurate to those wrong coordinates. And I mean, so to your point, I think as an industry and as developers, we have to make it hard on policymakers. But at the same time, we have to think forward and think to ourselves that downstream, those policymakers are all going to be with us when it comes to saving lives either on coalition forces or on our own force structure. They're going to be with us, especially if we have the ability to see under sea and we don't tell our coalition partners or we don't tell the Navy. If the Navy has the ability to see deep in an airspace, but they can't tell us because it goes over clear voice, I will tell you, that all changes in wartime. And so what we really need to do is make the policymakers very, very worried in our own inventiveness and be able to cobble this together. I can tell you that when we were down in Katrina, we ended up dismounting a Predator trackball and we strapped it to this 57th story of the Hilton Hotel in downtown New Orleans, and we had to put two of them because we had two 90-degree sets so we could actually focus that and send that to the New Orleans Police Department. And so we got that transmission capability because they wouldn't allow us to fly remotely piloted aircraft in that congested airspace. It's what drove me to get the Civil Air Patrol guy in and ask him, how do I put a portable kit on your airplane so that I don't ruin your airplanes, because they're all, by the way, privately owned. But I can get you out there so when you're searching for somebody lost in the canyons of Utah, you have a lot of eyes on that now. And so push I will tell you, push the policymakers. Do not yourselves be constrained in the capabilities that you offer, but I would also say have the ability to shut it off. Have the ability to shut it off. I can tell you another story from Vietnam, and that is that we used to encrypt all of our stuff north to south. The North Vietnamese realized we were using the same encryption, decryption code, so they would send it into our first system, clear voice, and of course we would encrypt it because we would be decrypting it, right? Decrypting our stuff, but we would encrypt their stuff, and it comes right through as noise. And it would come out the other end as clear voice, clear text. So they used our system to communicate north to south, and our guys never knew it because it was just noise. So this is about, you know, watching the system and giving the capability, but being able to shut it down when you can.
Hi, Mr. Secretary. My name is Jeffrey Damian Capella, and I very much appreciated your speech. My question deals with, due to the organizational nature of services, organizational nature is oftentimes built on tradition, and tradition, for the most part, being a good thing, can sometimes translate into institutional rigidity. What is your view surrounding the state of convergence between rates of invention innovation and subsequent technological advances that so often result in revolution in military affairs, and development of doctrine to incorporate those technologies? Additionally, how does the United States invention, innovation, and doctrinal development measure up against would-be peer competitors? For as you know, using your example of Blitzkrieg, the Germans actually partly developed Blitzkrieg by observing British doctrine on armored warfare in the interim years.
Well, I can start the answer by telling you that when I went over to go see if I could get a Russian propulsion system to put on the bottom of the Atlas V, I was introduced to the secret city of Himki and taken to their museum. I'm sitting there talking to some KGB guys and some propulsion development guys, and on the wall, there's all these pictures of people. And most of them are pretty gruff Russian guys, right? But the one on the end was Robert Goddard. Robert Goddard founded their propulsion system. Because in America, we were not ready for it. Then he came back over here and obviously made a name for himself. He's got a nice laboratory up in Gaithersburg, Maryland. But frankly, this divergence in physics that we're talking about here actually stems from many times our own developments. So in fact, there was another side to it, and that is that I used to tell people that we ought to declassify everything and sell tickets for our meetings. Because, they were so disjointed that I would imagine that it was far better than if we published a paper on it, which maybe have consolidated and given direction. I'll also tell you that one time Rumsfeld put out 10 goals, but he labeled them draft. Not a one of them got out to anybody. He was mystified as to why it wasn't disclosed by any paper or anything. And I said to him, because you didn't classify it. If you'd have classified it, even secret or confidential, hell, it would have showed up in the New York Times the next day. So I will say this, the customs and traditions that we enjoy are sometimes inhibit us from joining forces. But the growth of the Special Operations Command, the knowledge that we can share that kind of experiential device, the guy in front of the room, the JSOC commander, was an Air Force Brigadier General. The team, as we all know, or we all want to think to know, was Navy SEALs. I don't know who flew the helicopters. Could have been Army. But they were all members of the Joint Special Operations Command, which is, by the way, a synchronous command that is really incorporating all the things. The Marines are developing, in fact, one time I told the Marine Corps that, when everybody else gets to be light and lethal, what do you guys become? And they invented themselves as being the concept of operations developers. So you'll see in one of the books, The Three-Dimensional Warrior, it's all about what the Marine Corps sees as their future, because they're developing a laboratory system for expeditionary warfare, which will either lead or follow the special operations guys. But one of the real advantages of America, at least as we have seen it in the last 50 years, was the great fear of our light forces and the great fear of our expeditionary forces was the fact that if you made them really mad, we would come at you with heavy bombers and a heavy armor. And make no mistake, our leverage goes down if we only focus our capabilities on light forces. Because the real leverage turns out to be our ability to position big Navy ships, big Army divisions, and big Air Force bombers right offshore. And make no mistake, that's diplomatic leverage. In the words of Teddy Roosevelt, speak softly but carry a big stick. Thank you all very much. Have a great conference.
For you, interesting with the third.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. To each of the attendees here, I think we got 3 graduate credit hours of great learning, great opportunity, candor from the former Secretary, 21st Secretary of the Air Force. Challenges and insights are out there. Challenges to you, challenges to each and every one of us, challenges as we build a bench for the future by some of the great young folks in this room, both industry and in government.